welcome to this interview. I really appreciate there's 30 people so far, and I know more people are joining from 5 or 6 continents, probably 6 around the world. So thank you very much for doing that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody here. My name is Alistair Payton. I'm a partner in August Leadership, which is a global executive search and consulting firm. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Joachim Pawlik, who's based in Hamburg and is the chief executive of the international consulting business that bears his name. I interview a lot of people because I'm an executive search consultant. So I'm probably not good at many things, but I hope I'm good at getting people to talk about themselves. I tend to group the people I speak to into 2 simple categories. After I've spoken to them, I either feel like I have more energy or I feel like I have less. So very simple. I love talking to the people from whom I get energy, and I feel energized and excited and motivated after I've spoken to them. And I can guarantee that Joachim is one of those people, that after the next 40 minutes or so, I really hope you'll share the same feeling that I have. I'd just like to briefly introduce Joachim himself. Joachim's a former professional footballer. He's a leader of a 300-strong international consulting firm. He's on the board of several other businesses as well in Germany and around the region. And we at August Leadership have what is a very important partnership that we're developing with Joachim and his team to change the way things are done in some of the industries in which we operate around the world. So I'm delighted Joachim's joined us. Thank you very much, Joachim, and welcome to the interview.
Thank you, Alistair.
You're welcome. The reason we're having the conversation is in part because Joachim, amongst many other things, is also a published author. And his latest book is called in English, Work Out for Your Career. It's been on the best-selling list in Germany for several months and is now in an English form, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. The book's all about, and I hate to oversimplify, Joachim, I'm sure you'll talk to us in more detail about it. It's very much about the new world of work, and it's about what you can do to take personal responsibility for your own development, for your own career. So rather than in my day, when I started with Unilever 35 years ago and expected them to give me a career, I think people today need to expect to lead and manage their own careers as they develop. And the book is written in the form of a circuit training manual with a number of different stations to try and make sure you're fit for the world of work. So welcome, Joachim. And I wanted to start, if you don't mind, with a question we didn't talk about before, which is just give us a little bit of an insight into yourself. What is it that motivates you? What are the things that get you up in the morning and make you want to live and come to work?
Oh, first of all, thank you, Alistair. Hello to everyone also from my side. Well, that's a general question. Basically, when I founded the company 25 years ago, I started as a trainer. You train people for 2 days or for 4 days, and then you try to educate, you train them, you do exercises with them, and at the very end, you ask them, how was it? Okay, and then you get a feedback. And it was at the very beginning that I got good feedback. And interestingly for me, it was when I meet these people 3 months later or 6 months later, that the way how they implement their ideas of the training was always frustrating. Okay, so the general idea, when people think or they try to do something, what needs to be done that they actually do it? We call that, we have a title for that, from intention to action. That's, I would say, the main reason why I get up in the morning, to find that. And we made research now for the last 25 years on that. And that's also part of the book, Alistair. The question is, when someone has an idea, what he needs to change in life, an idea, what he needs to learn, what needs to be done that it's happening. That's what I'm driving on. Yeah, that's what I'm driving on.
Perfect, thank you. No, that's a great way of starting, I think. And tell me a bit about why you've written another book about personal development, about business. what is it that you think? Why do you think someone should read this book? What is it that's interesting about the book?
Basically, there's one experience I made. It's important to share with you all that we do training. I don't know, last year we counted then by accident, we trained 30,000 people in changing their behavior and their activities. And you know what's interesting? When you talk to all these people, they have always 25 different reasons why some things doesn't work out like they wanted to. Okay, so we have always the discussion about, what is my boss doing? What is he not doing? What is the culture of the company? What are the KPIs which I need to focus on? And does it have anything to do with what I want to change on my behavior? And that's one of the main reasons why, for me, it was important to address in that book that I think powerlessness and the idea of responsibility in their own development is one of the major and key developments what people needs to take. And it's, the moment COVID, I've got bored in the last 1.5 years because it changes my whole, day-to-day routine. I had the weekends off, basically, not traveling that much. So it was the right moment. But I think the time is, for one reason, good and important. We all know what digitalization is doing with our work environment. I mean, the speed is gaining, and it's getting, even when we think about the next 5 years, it's getting even faster than we do it today. And then there's the question, who's responsible for keeping up? Who's responsible for, steering your environment and not be, driven by the digitalization? And I think, Alistair, the main point is take care of yourself. Despite leadership, I always love to start a training. I would like you to develop despite leadership, because when you wait till they do the right things with you, you might wait forever.
Thank you. No, that's really interesting. You describe it that way. And I think I've read a lot of books about personal development, about management, about autobiographies, all sorts of things, where there's a lot of focus on skills development, learning things that you can apply in business situations or in your work life. I think what's quite interesting what's very interesting in your book and your philosophy is you focus a lot more on personality, on character, on individual motivation. Can you just talk a bit about why you feel that's so critical, and if there's anything in your own life from, I didn't mention your football career from the perspective of how successful or otherwise you were in your football career, but it would be great to understand if there's anything in your background or experience that's really driven you to focus on those aspects rather than on techniques and skills.
That there's one experience which was interesting for me. So I played professional soccer 30 years ago. I have to admit that's important to share with you. I'm absolutely unsuccessful. The ones of you who know how soccer works, I played second league in St. Pauli in Hamburg, and I never played a minute on the field on important games. But nevertheless, it was interesting. And I don't know if you, when you follow soccer or other sports and take a look at that in TV, how the sport was developed 30 years ago. I did that in soccer. And when you take a look at soccer 30 years ago, it is so unbelievable slow. When we played professional soccer, people were smoking. And, and every second week they had a beer, after the match. And when you take a look at soccer now, and I think that comparison that I made with almost every other sport, it has developed enormously. If I would have the skill set from 30 years ago, I wouldn't survive a minute on the field. And the interesting thing, the speed of development, the change that made in the sport doesn't take place in business. And so I was interested in why that is. And one of the reasons, of course, there are always lots of reasons behind it, but one of the reasons was that in sport, the development is much more professionalized. So there is a system how to develop people that doesn't take place in business. Okay, and that's one of the things I'm, Alistair, very interested in. And I think there are a couple of reasons why I hope I address a little bit in the book why that is. And I don't know, I can give you, for example, I give you one example. When you train people to go, I don't know, to make acquisitions with new clients, can we take that? Then there is still in the field of personal development the idea, let's train how they make telephone calls. Okay, Yeah, that's the skill set you need, how to handle it. And I think that's not enough. I'll tell you why. We found out that there is a personality item, we call it. In English is willpower or volition. And that is the ability to overcome when you don't like to do it. Okay, you get up in the morning, you know you need to talk to clients, you know how that works on the telephone, but you have other ideas in mind how to spend your day. And to develop that willpower, you can train. But before you're not good at that, you don't need a training of telephone, how to make a telephone call. Yeah, because you know that it's the right thing to do, but you don't do it. And that's one of the things, Alistair, which I think is extremely important. And that's almost for every of the 10 stations. I wrote the book. I think when you don't have these, any other skill set in technique is not useless, but it's not enough.
You talk in the book about a particular statement: internal motivation leads to the wrong priorities. Can you just explain a bit about what you meant by that, what you mean by that?
Generally spoken, I think success, is coming very often in a strategic point, in a time scale. When I make my telephone call now, I don't know if you make telephone calls for new business. I guess now you're all professionals and you're maybe beyond that stage, but I don't know any person in the world who likes making telephone acquisition calls. Okay, so, but I sometimes in different areas, and I can give you 20 other examples for that, you need to do that so that you have in 3 to 9 months a new client. And when I follow my motivation on that day where I need to decide, do I make a telephone call or not? Then it's misleading you because it's not fun. I don't even know people who like it, but you have to do it. And that's what I mean. And I think, it's also has to do with, do you go in a conflict? Do you give persons or people a feedback on things you don't like or what they, in your opinion, need to change? And that's always the same. When I only lead, with my motivation or through my motivation, then I don't do the things which are strategically necessary for my career.
Okay. And would you describe that? Is that resilience? Is that personal? What is it? What's at the heart of that? And how do you develop the strength, I suppose, to do it?
Yeah, that's an interesting way, and that's not so easy to answer. Let me give you one example. I very often, you know that, Alistair, when you have interviews, and you have an interview and maybe a language is needed for the job profile. And do you know these people who say, oh, I didn't speak English or French or Spanish in the last 10 years, but I can do it. And, if the job needs it, I go for it 3 months, right? Yeah. Now, we all know we say no to these people. And the interesting thing is, in every career in the management, that speaking a language well is necessary. Yeah, and one of the most important, but they don't do it if they don't need it. And when you then talk to the management people, learn English when you don't need it. Okay, learn presentation skills when you don't need it. Okay, then you don't need to do it every day for an hour, but you need to do strategically for a position or a challenge which is coming in the future. Yeah, and sometimes I think, Alistair, to be honest, life is too tough to put something on top of it which you don't need. So very many people just survive. But I strongly believe that the percentage of the week or percentage of the month, you have to invest strategically into your career when you want it to be sustainable. Yeah, and I think it's not a focus. And, the very simple answer is willpower. I think I try to write it all down in the willpower idea of develop volition.
No, I understand that, and that's something that you can. I guess it's like a muscle that you can train the muscle to be able to be more effective. You also talk in the book about a couple of conflicting things. I just wanted to ask you about. One is we work in an environment where you're trying to sell things. So that's at the end of the day, success or otherwise is measured by how able you are to sell something in our very hard commercial environment. You talk about in defeat accountability being really important, but you also talk about allowing vulnerability. Can you talk a bit about how you can, you've talked about willpower, you talk about accountability in defeat and taking responsibility. and you also talk about vulnerability. How is that possible to, how do you bring those things together in a tough commercial world?
I share with you an experiment I read about. Just imagine you are a professor and your students generally don't like your style of teaching, okay? And you're that kind of professor, and in the experiments they ask you to, when you go in front of the class, please spill your coffee cup. Okay, you look stupid in front of the people, make a mistake. Okay, and the interesting thing, they did that, and after that accident, they asked the students, "What do you think about the professor now?" Okay, and when you had a grade like, "I don't like him," then after the spilling the coffee cup, the grade was, "I don't like him at all." When you are a professor who are respected and liked, and they grade you with, "We like him and he's teaching well," and you spill the coffee cup, you get double the positive impact from the people in front, because they think he's a person who is vulnerable. He's a person, he opens up his personality. He's not, and that's one of the things what I really found out, you know, the management style of, "I'm the person who knows everything. I'm the person, just follow me and life is good. I'm the person who knows exactly what's going to happen in the next 3 years." That's done. Being vulnerable brings the people under you or near you to much more motivation to help solving the situation, much more motivation to just be also part of the solution, bring themselves in for whatever is there. Okay, so just being weak, that isn't it. No. But, you know, make your job as good as you can, and if you don't know it, be open with it, yeah, and bring people into your world.
I didn't understand that.
No, excuse me, that's my phone, which is muted, but has artificial intelligence, which just said, "I didn't understand that." So I've got no idea how to get around that. So I do apologize for that. I'll just throw it across the room. Thank you. That's really interesting. You talk about some of these characteristics, some of these personal characteristics, as well as skills and experiences. We've all just been through a very unusual time for the past 18 months that I hope we won't necessarily repeat again. But do you think any of the things that you wrote about, do you think any of the way that you're describing is going to change as we come out of the pandemic and the pandemic's impact, and we think differently perhaps about our work, about our relationships? Do you think any of what you've said is less valid or potentially more valid if there is a post-COVID world in the world of work in the future?
To be honest, COVID, not in any aspect of the things I wrote. Digitalization, that's the impact. I absolutely believe that it's, for now and for the future, not enough to just do your job. It is not enough to just face the challenges you have today. You need to have a certain percentage of your life, of your day or week or months, where you invest in the future. Okay, where you try to develop skill sets which are not needed now, but which we are sure of will be needed tomorrow. Okay, that's one of the main things. And, you know, generally spoken, Alistair, that's just a question of the speed around us. And there, COVID, of course, was a, catalyst for speeding up the digitalization, which some of the people just, overrolled. Yeah, but generally spoken, I think digitalization and what's going to happen with our world in the next 5 years, which is also interesting. I talked to so many intelligent people who are trying to predict the future, and basically some of them told me their ideas, and I always went out and say, I don't know if they have a clue. So we all don't know what's going to happen. So that's also one of the reasons why we need to, develop our skill set. And the skill sets needs to be more wider. It needs to be more systematic. It's not only the one thing what you need to do. So you have more flexibility to adapt to the changing world in the future.
No, that's really interesting. And I think we're finding when we speak to clients now, the emphasis on hiring for attitude and culture and values is definitely probably more important than hiring against the specific role. not least
Exactly.
because they can't actually tell you what the roles are half the time when they're asking us to recruit for them. So that's understandable, and it's definitely accelerating what you recruit for now might not be in existence as a role in a year or two's time. So that's good advice. And you operate internationally in a number of countries. You travel extensively, or you did travel extensively, and will do again, I'm sure. And we've got people from 6 different continents on this call. Are there any, without being too general, I suppose, are there any big differences between cultures, nationalities, styles of people that you see in some of the characteristics that, do some people find it easier, for example, to take that kind of personal responsibility for their behavior than other nationalities or groups do? Is there anything in that at all that you would throw out to the group?
Honestly, no. And I say no because basically I don't know. It might be. What I can say that my wife is American. In the last 15 years, I lived 6 years in Paris. So generally spoken, I'm into the American culture. I'm into the French culture. That's why I have a little deeper and closer look and experience. And honestly, I don't find any big difference in the things the book is about. Of course, huge cultural difference, but not in the general idea of personal development regarding what's happening around you. I think, to be honest, that's very personally, very individual, and also the path each individual has to take. Yeah, that makes the difference, and not a country or the culture.
Okay, really interesting. And linked to that, again, it may be difficult to answer it, but you've got a lot of data that you've developed for your diagnostic tools as well that you use. Are there big profile differences between men and women, for example, that make it easier or more difficult for men, women, or other characteristics, I guess, to take on this kind of approach most effectively? Because you think that men with our kind of archetype of confidence and belief and don't really look at our vulnerabilities might find it easier to do what you're describing than women, who again in general characteristics would be seen to be being a bit more self-critical.
I give you 2 answers on that. The whole book, and that's one of very, for me, an important point when I say I'm looking for the last 25 years, scientifically, how do people go from intention to action, that all the stations I wrote about in the book has a scientific fundament on which it's based. And when we talk about man and woman, I don't bring into that whole station's scientific fundament. An experience I made is when I take a look at I have one station where I wrote about power and the question of, what personality structure you need to go on top to heating for the top. And if you are up there, why do so many people change their behavior? Okay. And there's one of the things, to give one example, that we found that vanity is one of the thriving sources of, I want to be number one. Okay. And if they are up there and their thriving source is vanity and they are number one, I don't know if you have that experience sometimes, then we always, have the experience that these people lose ground. They think they are, they don't need to listen to anyone. They have people around themselves, just praising them to death, and they think they are Godfather. And I can really tell, I only know men who are like that, no woman. I have always the experience made that women are much more driven by good results. They're driven by culture and not driven by themselves. Yeah, to be honest, that's in my experience one of the reasons why women are not as much on top of they should be. Yeah, but if they are, there is no danger for people around.
Okay, good, thank you. And you've written your book in the form of a circuit training, 10 stations, which is an easy, accessible structure. So it's a very easy book to read because of that. And you can pick out certain elements. You don't necessarily need to read it in exact order. And we talked a bit about muscle training and how you develop skills and how you develop the ability to be resilient, to have the kind of confidence to build your own, to develop yourself. Mm-hmm. What parallels would you draw between your sport and business in that respect?
Also, the generally spoken, I think that for me, one of them, interestingly, we have one station, keep at it. That's the thing, I guess, which, impressed me the most when I made research on the question is, how important is talent? And is there something like talent? And when you think about the development of people, how much could a person learn or change? And I don't know if one of you is into that topic. The interesting thing is nothing of, either is talent is everything or talent is nothing is proven scientifically. There are different people who think differently about it. But the one experience, when you start playing soccer, okay, and you see as a young man, or if you're 17 or 18 or something, Ronaldo and Messi, okay, you look at him and say, I want to be like them. And then you start training, trying to be like them. I don't have it very often that from the very beginning, people say, I never can reach that. So all the people, when we take about Nachwuchs, the young people who want to be professional or so, they're all heading for the best. And I have so many people in management who see things, personality styles, activities, presentation skills in other people and say, I never can do that. Okay, they limit themselves tremendously. Yeah, for different reasons. And I think that's when you compare soccer to business. And also when I think about my career, that was for me the most impressive finding, that everything is possible if you accept to pay the price for the change.
Interesting. Thank you. That's really helpful. Before we open, before we open the conversation and ask people if they have any questions, you're holding every year, I think you hold a Congress for top executives, and this is your 20th year this year of doing this. And you have a Nobel Prize winner this time talking as a guest speaker on November the 15th. Can you just tell us a bit about what the purpose of your Congress is, and why Daniel Kahneman, if I pronounce his name correctly, yeah. Why him as the guest speaker?
So what we do, I share with you, what we have once a year. It's always in the time between October and December. We sit down and discussing what skill set is next year important to gain, to develop. Okay, so we did that for the last 20 years. And when we sat together last year, we defined the topic for this year conference, the new empathy. Because what we found out last year, that of course the digitalization brings the definition of empathy to a complete new level. And the second thing is, all the big research we made is that, for the old people, let me call myself old now with 55 years old, and the new generation Z is coming into a company, it's an interesting challenge to be empathetic about them. Because to be honest, I don't even understand them today. Interestingly is that these people expect more empathy from the leaders in the future than the older generation did in the past. So that was the reason why we focused on that. And what we do then, we have a content team which makes research on everything. So you said that right, in 3 weeks, is it? There I give a speech about the new empathy, which is quite an interesting topic. And Kahneman, I don't know if you know him, I'm just in love with him. He published a book, Slow and Fast Thinking. It was 5 or 6 years ago. I read it 10 times. Yeah, and all the things I learned about people. He's an amazing guy. But, if you buy the book, Slow and Fast Thinking.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.